The rain poured heavily over the quiet city street as flashing police lights cut through the darkness. People gathered on the sidewalk, watching as two officers roughly dragged a tall black man toward a patrol car. The man stayed calm despite the chaos around him. His hands were cuffed behind his back, but his expression showed no fear. A young officer shouted accusations about resisting arrest. The crowd murmured in confusion. No one seemed to know what had really happened. As the car door slammed shut, the man simply looked at the officers and said softly, "You're making a mistake you'll regret tomorrow." Inside the patrol car, the officers laughed among themselves. One of them mocked the man, saying he looked too calm for someone heading to jail. The man leaned back quietly, staring out the window at the city lights passing by. His calmness made the younger officer uneasy, though he couldn't explain why. Most suspects shouted, threatened lawsuits, or begged for mercy. This man did none of that. Instead, he sat silently as the car sped toward the precinct. The older officer shook his head and said confidently, "By morning, you'll wish you'd cooperated." At the police station, the booking process began immediately. Officers pushed paperwork across the counter and photographed the man like any other suspect. A sergeant glanced at the report but didn't look closely. The accusation was vague, disturbing the peace and resisting arrest. Still, the man remained composed. When the officer asked for his name, he answered clearly and confidently. Some officers exchanged glances, sensing something unusual about his presence. He didn't behave like someone afraid of the system. Instead, he watched everything around him carefully, as if quietly observing how the department operated. The holding cell door slammed shut with a metallic echo. A few other detainees sat inside, whispering among themselves about why they were there. The new arrival leaned against the wall calmly, folding his arms. One man asked what he had done to get arrested. The stranger simply smiled and said, "Sometimes people don't recognize who they're dealing with." His mysterious response made the others laugh, assuming he was joking, but the man's eyes showed quiet confidence. Outside the cell, officers joked loudly about the arrest, completely unaware that the situation was far more complicated than they realized. Across town that same night, the mayor's office received a phone call that made several officials uneasy. A confidential investigation into the police department had been underway for months. The city council had finally approved a new internal affairs chief to lead the investigation. The appointment was meant to remain secret until the morning announcement. The mayor's assistant confirmed everything was ready for the official introduction at the precinct. None of them realized the man chosen for the job was currently sitting inside a holding cell in that very building. Back in the jail cell, the night dragged slowly. The arrested man sat quietly while others complained about their situations. One detainee asked why he wasn't trying to call a lawyer. The man simply replied, "Morning will take care of everything." His calm answer puzzled everyone around him. Meanwhile, officers continued their normal shifts, unaware that the man they had arrested was connected to the biggest internal investigation the department had faced in years. Surveillance cameras quietly recorded every moment of the night, capturing conversations that would soon become very important. Near midnight, a rookie officer reviewed the arrest report again. Something about it bothered him. The charges seemed unusually thin. He walked over to the senior officer who made the arrest and asked for clarification. The veteran officer brushed him off, claiming the suspect had been acting suspicious and disrespectful. The rookie hesitated but didn't push further. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The suspect's calm confidence lingered in his mind, making him wonder whether the department had just made a serious mistake. Hours passed quietly in the dimly lit station. Officers rotated shifts, paperwork stacked up, and the city outside slowly fell asleep. Inside the holding cell, the man closed his eyes, resting as if he had no worries at all. His peaceful expression contrasted sharply with the tension in the building. Unknown to everyone there, several city officials were preparing documents for a major announcement scheduled for the next morning. That announcement would send shockwaves through the entire police department and change the careers of several officers forever. Early in the morning, the precinct commander arrived earlier than usual. He was expecting an important visitor from city headquarters. Rumors had circulated about a new internal affairs chief being assigned to investigate misconduct complaints. The commander gathered his staff and warned them to remain professional during the meeting. He had no idea that the person he was preparing to greet had spent the entire night inside his own jail cells. As officers prepared the conference room, the building buzzed with curiosity about who the mysterious new chief might be. Meanwhile, the man in the holding cell finally stood up as morning light filtered through the small window. A guard approached with paperwork for release processing. Apparently, someone from city administration had called the station early that morning. The guard seemed confused but unlocked the cell anyway. The detainees watched as the calm stranger walked out without protest. One asked jokingly if he had powerful friends. The man paused before leaving and simply replied, "You could say that." The officers at the booking desk looked surprised when the man stepped out of the holding area. They expected arguments or complaints, but instead he politely asked where the main conference room was located. His calm tone confused the desk officer, who pointed him toward the hallway. The man straightened his jacket and walked confidently through the precinct as if he belonged there. Several officers glanced at him curiously, wondering why a recently released detainee was wandering through the building without supervision. Inside the conference room, department leaders gathered around a long table. The precinct commander checked his watch repeatedly, waiting for the city officials and the new internal affairs chief to arrive. The atmosphere was tense. Investigations from internal affairs often meant trouble for officers accused of misconduct. Everyone sat quietly until the door slowly opened. The man who had spent the night in the holding cell stepped inside calmly. At first, no one recognized him. The commander frowned, assuming the man had entered the wrong room. "This meeting is private," he said firmly. But the visitor calmly placed a folder on the table and introduced himself. The room fell silent as he announced his name and title, the new Chief of Internal Affairs for the entire department. Confusion spread instantly through the room. Several officers exchanged shocked glances. The commander stood up abruptly, struggling to process what he had just heard. The man continued speaking calmly, explaining that he had been appointed by the mayor and city council to lead a major investigation into departmental conduct. Then he looked directly at a few officers in the room and added quietly, "Interestingly, my first case happened last night." The room grew uncomfortably silent. The officers who had arrested him the night before slowly realized what was happening. Their confident smiles vanished instantly. The new chief opened the folder and slid several documents across the table. Inside were copies of the arrest report, surveillance footage stills, and disciplinary review forms already prepared. He explained that Internal Affairs had been monitoring complaints about the precinct for months. The commander cleared his throat nervously. He asked why the chief hadn't revealed his identity during the arrest. The new chief replied calmly that the situation had provided valuable insight into how officers treated citizens when they believed no consequences existed. His quiet explanation made several officers shift uncomfortably in their seats. The chief continued presenting evidence gathered from body cameras, witness statements, and surveillance footage. Each piece of information painted a troubling picture of how the arrest unfolded. The officers involved began realizing that their behavior had been fully recorded and documented. Outside the conference room, word had already begun spreading quickly through the station. Officers whispered to each other in disbelief. The man who had spent the night in their holding cell was now their highest internal investigator. Some officers looked worried, others looked embarrassed. Back inside the meeting, the chief explained the purpose of internal affairs: to protect the integrity of the department and maintain public trust. He emphasized that most officers served honorably, but misconduct damaged everyone's reputation. The chief then revealed that last night's incident would be officially reviewed as part of a broader departmental investigation. His calm tone carried authority. No one in the room dared interrupt him. One of the officers who made the arrest tried to defend his actions. He claimed the suspect had been acting suspicious and uncooperative. The chief listened carefully before responding. He reminded the officer that suspicion alone was never justification for excessive force or unlawful detention. The chief displayed still images captured from surveillance cameras. They showed the exact moment officers had grabbed him without clear cause. The evidence spoke louder than any explanation. Several supervisors lowered their heads, realizing the seriousness of the situation. The department's reputation was now directly at stake. The chief calmly stated that accountability was necessary to rebuild trust with the community. His voice remained steady and professional. He explained that disciplinary reviews would begin immediately. Officers involved would be temporarily reassigned pending investigation. Outside the room, reporters had already begun arriving at the precinct after hearing rumors about the surprise appointment. Inside the meeting, the chief concluded his presentation by emphasizing fairness. The investigation would rely only on facts and evidence. He reminded everyone that the badge represented responsibility, not power over citizens. Some officers in the room nodded quietly, realizing the message was directed at the